Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back, Brandon again. Before we get into today's video, I want to take a quick second to say thanks so much to anyone who ordered a Campbell Fitness t-shirts from Forged Iron Training. We actually ended up moving a lot more shirts than I had anticipated, so much so in fact that we're cutting the pre-order short. So if you haven't ordered one, you can still get one up until Wednesday, February 26th at around 8 o'clock or so Eastern Standard Time. At that point, we're going to stop all orders and we're just going to go and print those shirts out, and that's all we're printing. So it's kind of a one and done deal. So anyone who's interested, they're $20 on Forged Iron Training. And again, big thanks to anyone who's ordered one up to this point. Now, I wanted to get in today's video and just talk a little bit about steroids, only because it was something that I thought might be an interesting little subject to discuss. Now, as part of this, I will warn you that I'm going to be rambling on as I'm driving. I'm going to pay attention to the road. I haven't really thought this out too thoroughly. So for all of you out there who don't like my rambling videos, you might want to turn it off, only because you're probably going to have a bad time. So you've been forewarned. Now, for today, what I want to talk about is just my opinion on people who use steroids in the aspect of competition. So for those of you that don't know, which I don't know why you wouldn't if you're watching my channel, I like to compete in powerlifting. Now, part of that is because I like trying to move heavy weights and really testing myself, and part of it might just be I like people to look at me in a singlet to really show off my pasty white thighs, but that's a little bit of a different story. That being said, though, I get a lot of questions about people who use drugs and my opinion of them, you know, from other YouTubers to competitive athletes to just my thoughts in general. So that's what I wanted to share in this case. So in terms of powerlifting and people who use steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, I honestly don't really care for the most part. And what I mean by that is there are different divisions in weightlifting where it's pretty much known that people are using drugs, as well as there's divisions like the amateur, which hopefully people aren't using drugs. So I'm going to hope people have enough sense to really weed themselves out in that matter. If you're really using drugs and competing in amateur still, that's just kind of sad for you. So then it doesn't really play into how I feel, other than just I feel sorry for you that you feel the need to do that in a sport that's not really any incentive monetarily to do that. I look at powerlifting as a very selfish sport because you're judged based off how you perform as an individual. Now, that being the case too, there's very few people out there who actually make a living solely from powerlifting. So it doesn't bother me if someone's going to use drugs to enhance their totals, because to me that doesn't really mean jack crap, because it has nothing to do, again, with my totals. Now, some might say, yeah, but what if someone gets first place and you end up getting second and they use drugs? Again, I don't really care, because I go into each meet just trying to improve upon what precedent I've set, meaning that if last meet I hit a certain total, it would be my goal in that meet to hit a better total. You really never know who's going to show up at a particular meet. So, I mean, you might get first place in some cases where you're the only person in your weight class, and I don't think that first place really holds much weight, so to say. And that's a little bit of a pun, but I hope you get what I'm trying to convey here. It's a very individualized sport, so people using drugs in that aspect, it really doesn't bother me too much because it has nothing to do with me. Now, in other things like bodybuilding, it might be a little bit different of an opinion, because you go there and you're judged based off of how your looks hold up to other people's. And a lot of this really varies depending on who you're being judged by. But again, the way that I look at it is it's not a huge deal to me, and again, take that from someone who doesn't actually compete in bodybuilding, only because, again, with bodybuilding, it's very rare that someone's going to base a profession off of that. So it's not like you're getting cheated out of any kind of money in most cases, unless you're at the very top level of the sport, and in which case you're probably using drugs anyway, so it kind of nullifies that, in my opinion. Now, as far as other sports go, I actually understand why people in that case might choose to use drugs, because, again, they're compensated monetarily, and in most cases they're compensated very, 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 very well. And I think a lot of sports people use this to get better contracts and as well perform better, which again ties into better contracts. So it's very much based off money. So in that case, again, I don't really get mad at people. I mean, if you talk to anyone in any profession, and maybe even ask yourself if there was something that you could do, and it might not necessarily be the most legitimate things in your mind, but if you could further your career and increase the amount of compensation you get at your job, and you knew other people were doing it as well, would you do it? And the answer, I think, for the most part, would probably be yes. Now, obviously, your own individual morals come into play, but if there is a way to increase your compensation at your current job and still somewhat be safe. And again, the term safe here is really dependent on context, but I think most people would jump at that opportunity. So I don't really blame sports people for taking that. And again, I try to look at it from my perspective of it's not necessarily hurting me. Now, what if your favorite team has a bunch of players who use drugs? So if you like the Yankees, then chances are a lot of your favorite players use performance-enhancing drugs. But again, chances are the players on your team are doing the same thing. It's pretty much common knowledge. And I think that's kind of the case. And if you don't think that there are people out there in professional sports who don't use drugs, and again, it's not everybody, but I think an overwhelming majority of them probably do at that level, then I think you're just being naive. And again, that's my own personal opinion, but what I'd really love to do is hear from you guys below. Let me know where you feel you stand in terms of people using drugs, if it's in powerlifting, if it's in bodybuilding, if it's in professional sports, because I think it'd be really interesting to hear some differences of opinions based off of who you are, what you compete in, where you live, your age, and maybe just your experience with them if you have any as is. So that's my opinion. Hope it makes some sense. Didn't want to drag this on too long, and I don't think I have. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.